Welcome to the television edition of Radio Friends, where we feature guests from all over central Missouri. This week, we'll find out more about dementia and Black history in Missouri. All that and a lot more. So let's get started right now. It's always a pleasure to have you here, Gary. And we were going to deal with several different topics that you wanted to touch on. The first of all, what is that?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about blind people and being diabetic. Blindness is one of the leading causes of diabetes, and people are really struck for a loop. They don't really know what to do. Of course, you've got to change your diet when you're a diabetic, and that means doing more cooking on your own. It means giving up packaged goods, eating the sugary pies, eating the things that got you to be diabetic in the first place. So when you realize that you've got diabetes, there are lots of bad things that can come from it, and one of them, if you don't get pretty quick intervention, is blindness. And it can be loss of sense of touch. If you lose enough sensitivity in your feet, it can even be balance and other things. So there are lots of reasons when you learn that you are getting high blood sugar readings to aggressively change your diet and take what medication they suggest that you take.
Now, that's not what caused your blindness.
It is not what caused my blindness, but I managed to get diabetes anyway. I ate my way to it.
Okay. So, you've got diabetes and you're blind. How do you handle that?
Well, too many people have been shipped off to nursing homes because they figure that they can't do things like measuring their blood sugar. You can't figure out how much of a dose of medication to give if you can't check your blood sugar. Well, we've got talking blood glucose meters now, and traditionally it's meant taking your finger and squeezing it until you get the blood up, and then stabbing your finger with to draw blood, and then taking this little blood strip and trying to find that spot of blood on your finger and getting it to read. Now, if you don't get enough of it on the spot, you got to stab yourself all over again, and you got to use another strip, and it can be a real problem. We have gotten recently something called a glucose monitor. And the glucose monitor has a sensor right here. I see
it right there. You wear it on your arm.
Yes. You put it in and it lasts for 2 weeks. The one I use lasts 2 weeks. And then I take my phone
9:10 a.m.
and I'll raise the volume.
So you've got an app on your phone.
Button.
Yep. And now I'm going to tell it to scan my sensor.
Ready to scan.
Okay.
Scan complete. Libre link. Back air. My glucose. Sensor icon. 124.
What?
124.
So what does that mean?
It means that I am well within range. If it were much above 140, I would be worried. If it were down below 80, I would worry. The great thing about this one is, believe that or not, doing that scan didn't hurt a bit.
Right.
It's not at all like the finger stick. It's not as questionable as, am I going to get enough on the strip? So now if I wanted to, I could administer insulin to drop that blood sugar level. I could use fast-acting insulin or slow-acting insulin.
So you would administer the insulin yourself?
Right.
You would give yourself a shot?
Yes. Exactly.
And how do you give yourself a shot being blind?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out, okay, how much insulin do I need? And do I want fast-acting or slow-acting? And that means you have to in some way label the insulin so you know. Then you take something called a click pen and you dip it into the insulin and you turn it X number of clicks to get however much of a dose that you want. It has a needle on the end of it, and once you've counted up 10 clicks, then you take it and you give yourself a shot in the stomach.
Now, you've got to have a lot of confidence in yourself doing this, not being able to see what you're doing, but using your sense of hearing and touch to be able to administer the insulin injection to yourself.
I agree. But I think that the confidence has to be all the way around. The confidence has to be, as a blind person, I can still do a lot of things. I can still get here. I can still go home. I can still travel. I can still cook, even though I have hot surfaces. So, in one sense, my fear of needles is separate and apart from my fear of being blind and dealing with needles, if you get what I mean.
Yes, I do. And just to clarify, both you and your wife are blind.
We are.
You live alone. You and your wife live in your house,
Yeah.
taking care of yourself, cooking yourself.
Yep.
And you told me you're going to go traveling very soon.
Oh, yes. We're going to go to Baltimore for almost a week.
And you travel on your own.
We do.
Both of you being blind.
Yeah, we do. We take the dog along, but he doesn't give shots.
Okay.
So-
All right. The one other thing I wanted to ask you before we are out of time. Now that insulin that you, what do you call it? Insulin patch that you have on you?
Oh, no, it's a blood glucose sensor.
Okay, a blood glucose sensor. Can anybody use that, have that, or is it only for blind people?
No, anybody can have it. It comes with its own reader. You can use the phone app if you want. And
So you could ask your doctor for it,
Exactly.
and then you don't have to keep.
Exactly. You don't have to do the blood sticks all the time. We're going to have a Meet the Blind month in October, and on October the 29th, we're going to have a Zoom meeting that everybody can be invited to, and we're going to show people a lot about this technique and many, many others, so that you don't have to come to anything. All you have to do is Zoom into our room. We're going to show a little movie on blindness, and then we're going to show a lot of techniques like how do you do the shot? How do you check your blood sugar? How do you do simple things like if you can't see, how do you pour coffee? How do you scramble eggs? How do you cook bacon? Just lots of things.
I just find that fascinating, Gary. That your independence is very enlightening, and it makes us realize that those of us who are sighted and we gripe and complain about so many things, we really shouldn't be.
That's probably right. I think that blind people gripe about things that we shouldn't be griping about either, but I don't think we should take the independence for granted.
What do you want to deal with today?
Well, I've helped facilitate a caregiver support group for persons with dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's type dementia or vascular dementia after a stroke in Fulton. And I want to talk about the things that we have learned together today. So with that in mind, just in general, all of us see the life changes in people who have dementia. Dementia and Alzheimer's itself can last 2 to 20 years. So it's hardly noticeable what's going on when a person starts having memory loss. And today, we might think that if we're really objective, that this disease, when you do an MRI and you see the result and the scan shows just an empty area in the central part of the brain.
Is that what it shows?
It's
If you
empty,
have
it's
dementia,
just black. Yeah.
There's an MRI will show an empty area?
It is a black hole, if you want to call it that. And, we see that, and, I remember telling my dad after talking to the neurologist that it looked like he had Alzheimer's disease. And I said, there are 26,000 people in Missouri that have this. And he said, well, I'm not alone, am I? And I think we have a perspective, either ours or from a caregiver's perspective, that is unique. Each of us have a different perspective. But when it becomes real and someone that we know or love begins to experience this memory loss, their ability to make decisions, being able to drive safely, remembering the way home. You can drive a car, you know how to do it. You've done it for 60 years, but you may get to a place where you don't know where you are, an unfamiliar place.
And that's frightening.
It is very frightening. And so, but as I said, working with caregivers, I think one of the most difficult things perhaps is to look at the loss of relationship. For example, if you take someone whose wife of 50 to 60 years is in a long-term care facility and does not recognize him, and he can visit, and sometimes it comes around and sometimes it doesn't, but when he goes home to an empty house, there is the loneliness that the caregiver is going to experience, as well as what happens with the person with dementia.
Right.
Friends, adult children, neighbors, people are there to help, but they really don't understand what it's like to really experience that loss.
No, because each person's life is unique and individual, and everybody experiences it differently.
That's right. And this is a kind of grief, I say. People feel this change emotionally in this loss. And so in working with other caregivers, I have come to believe that the best thing we can do to help is to be patient, to listen to one another, listen to the caregiver, don't try to fix it. Listen to the person with dementia, even though you've heard the story 100 times, because the area of the brain that is affected by the kind of dementia you have affects short-term memory. You don't remember where you put your keys, but long-term memory is more likely going to stay intact. You may remember well things that happened in childhood or other periods of your life, but what you had for breakfast, or if you ate breakfast, is not going to be something that a person with dementia can remember. So when we meet and we listen to each other, we share the experiences from different kinds of dementia. Because in a caregiver support group, there are folks who have dealt with Alzheimer's, they've dealt with the vascular dementia, all different things, and we share resources like I do on this program from the Alzheimer's Association that allow you to find out what's out there that can be of help. But when you're down in the middle of it and dealing with, say, a spouse, it's hard to do that.
Oh, it's a totally different situation. If people want more information or they're looking for some help or assistance, what's the phone number to go to?
The 24/7 helpline to talk with a consultant that looks at your own situation and is 1-800
Okay.
272-3900. But also, by calling that number, you can find the resources in your community. And if you
Okay.
go online to alz.org, that will get you a connection to what's called Resource Finder.
Okay.
And if you click that, you can find the zip code for your community and contact for the caregiver support group.
Got it. Now, I don't want you to go until you read your poem, because this has become a tradition now.
All
You write
right.
a poem for each segment you do. Go ahead, Lois.
I've titled it Undisclosed.
Okay.
Society flows with surface reflections. Glances are intermittent, and a moment passes. My glance is mine, no duplicate exists, as all is fluid and never returns. As a river flows, debris surfaces, quickly pulled under, flowing out of sight. The undercurrent is invisible, undetectable from above, and this impacts relationships. Diluted traditions as people merge are unclear below the surface. They spread separately and lost links to the past. But it is a subtle process, unrecognized later, the roots untraceable, and the source obscured.
You wanted to touch today on back to school for kids, because a lot of times when they go back to school, dental habits change that they've been living with through most of their life.
That's right. Yeah. And so this time of year, coming off of summer, sometimes things are a little more relaxed in the summer. We're staying up later, we're you're maybe more a little, the diet maybe not as good as where the people are playing more, and you get back into that school routine. And so sometimes it's just, we just emphasize kind of reevaluate your oral health habits and just make sure if things were slacking a little bit over summertime when things felt a little more relaxed, as they get back into that back to school routine of a more rigid schedule, just make sure that brushing 2 times a day for 2 minutes each time, floss nightly, and just kind of getting back in setting those good habits, good routines as they kind of get into that back to school habit with, homework and extracurricular activities,
Yeah.
all the things that kind of keep them on schedule.
Now you said brushing 2 times. I thought it was best to brush 3 times a day after every meal.
Well, that doesn't hurt. Absolutely. If you have the ability to brush after every meal, if you keep a toothbrush with you, in your purse and your desk at work. A lot of people are working from home still, so that creates a lot of ease to brush after every meal, potentially, and that can just go and clean off the sugars and the food that may have been on there after the meal.
Okay, let's break this down into 2 categories. First of all, the young kids that are going to school for the first time. They haven't been away from home. They're in either kindergarten or the first grade. What is the message you need to get across to parents about good dental health for those kids?
I think since they're in a new routine, a lot of times kids struggle with getting up in the morning, and so just making sure you're still getting up and making sure you're brushing your teeth in the morning, and if they're more tired at the end of the day, just still establishing that care at the end of the night before they go to bed.
Right. Now, Philip, you were telling me that you have some kids that you've been seeing for 6 or 7 years. They haven't had a cavity in their mouth, and then they graduate from high school, they go away to college, and they come back and they open their mouth, and you say, "Oops, you got some cavities there. What happened?" Why is that prevalent?
It is something we see, and a lot of times it is when those kids go off to, and young adults, they head off to college and they have some of that first a bit of freedom. They maybe don't always have a parent telling them, reminding them to brush, at night. They are up later. They have a lot of access to, the energy drinks and the sugary sodas and things, and their late night studying, and maybe just those good habits they had built in. They just they get a little bit lax on when they go off to school and are out of the house and have some of that freedom. And so we have seen it. They'll come back, a year and a half later. The home care has gone downhill, and we see some cavities in people for the first time. And so we always kind of preach to our soon-to-be high school seniors and the ones who are about to graduate of, stay in that good routine. You've done well your whole, childhood. As you kind of graduate into this new phase of life, keep up the good habits so that as you continue to see us, that we don't have to talk about cavities.
So you really do, that does happen.
It does, yeah, it does happen. Yeah, those college years can sometimes take a little bit of a toll on some people's teeth.
Okay, so the bottom line is try to eat healthy, all right? Brush as often as you can, at a minimum of 2 times a day. If you can brush 3 times a day, that's good. Can you brush too much? Can you brush so much that you're starting to brush the enamel off your teeth? Is that a problem, ever?
Well, you can brush too hard, yes, definitely.
You can brush too hard.
Yes.
But you can't brush too much.
No.
Okay. What about using the water pick versus flossing? Can you do one or the other?
Well, they say that nothing quite replaces flossing because...
Even the water pick?
Well, you're still trying to get the bacteria that's in between the contacts of the teeth. And water picks tend to just get the area underneath that contact or above it. But I would also say if you're not going to floss and you're going to water pick, then that's better than nothing.
Nothing at all.
Yes.
But nothing beats flossing. Just the good old-fashioned flossing.
If you're doing it correctly, yes.
Okay. The other question I have, there are toothbrushes out now that say they both brush and floss at the same time. Is that as good as doing the flossing itself? Those toothbrushes? They're the electric toothbrushes.
I haven't seen research on it.
Yeah, I haven't
So I'm
seen
not
the
sure.
studies on it, but
But you know what I'm talking
I do.
about.
Yeah, so they have a built-in water flosser in them, and they call it a water flosser instead of the water pick because it's not quite as powerful as the water pick.
And they're
is
quite
my
expensive
understanding.
too.
Yes, and they
Because I
can't.
looked because when I saw the ad on television, I thought, "Wow, this is a good deal. This is something good." It's flossing and it's brushing all at the same time.
And what that's really doing is it's using that water pressure to kind of displace and dispel all the food and things build up that could be between the teeth. But like Dr. Abe was saying, when you floss, you're taking that floss through where the teeth touch and that contact. And so anything that's right there where the teeth are touching, that floss gets in there.
You're
and can
breaking it up.
Break that up as well. And so it all goes back to all of that in conjunction and combined together will help make the gum stronger and healthier. So one doesn't necessarily replace the other. They work in concert.
Okay. We talk about all these different things, and you may say, "Oh, I don't really need to be concerned about that." If you get a toothache, or if a cavity falls out and you start getting this terrible ache in your mouth, you say, "I wish I would have done something a little bit earlier." All right. So the important thing is just practice preventive maintenance on your mouth. Brush regularly, floss, water pick, watch your diet. And you were saying that if you can't brush at lunchtime, sometimes just putting water in your mouth and squishing it around will break up some of that bacteria.
Yeah, and it'll rinse the sugars off the teeth. It's just a good kind of helps the mouth reestablish the pH balance it needs to be at.
Welcome to Radio Friends.
Thank you for the invitation.
You were filling me in on all of this information before we came on the air. The Negro League baseball team will be celebrating 100 years next week, right? Is that September the 14th?
No, what happened was that the actual 100th anniversary was last year in 2020.
Okay.
Because the Negro League Baseball League was founded February 13th, 1920. But due to the virus and everything, we had to postpone our celebration, and now they're calling it 101 because this is actually the 101st anniversary of the founding of Negro League Baseball.
Okay. So it should have been 100 years last year.
Last year,
All right.
yes.
So tell us a little bit about the Negro League. How did this all come about?
Well, in July the 14th, 1877, the white men who owned Major League Baseball teams had a meeting in Buffalo, New York. And they decided that they were no longer going to sign black players to Major League contracts. And in baseball history, it's called the Gentleman's Agreement. And a Gentleman's Agreement, and quoting from their minutes, it said several of our players are growing anxious to leave because of the colored element. And therefore, they instructed the secretary of the major leagues to no longer sign black players to major league contracts. And so from 1877 until 1946, no black players were signed to play Major League Baseball.
So that's when the black players formed their own league.
Well, it took a while because between 1877 and 1920, black players it was kind of like what I call the catch as catch can. They played where they could, they formed teams where they could, they barnstormed, and they made as much money as they could, and they also played in Latin America. They played in Puerto Rico and Mexico and Venezuela and places like that. But then in February the 13th, 1920, they had a meeting at the YMCA in Kansas City, and out of that meeting came 8 teams that formed the first segment of Negro League Baseball.
Now, how does Kansas City and St. Louis fit into this?
Well, Kansas City, one was the YMCA, which is still there, and they've converted that now into the Buck O'Neill Education Center. But the actual building where the meeting was held is still standing. And so that's where Kansas City came in. And Kansas City has another kind of unique niche in Negro League Baseball in that they had the only white owner in the initial 8 teams. There was one white guy who owned the Kansas City Monarchs, and that was J.L. Wilkerson.
Okay. And then St. Louis had
Then St. Louis had the St. Louis Stars and the St. Louis Giants. But these teams in Negro League Baseball, the economy kind of determined how long the team lasted. And sometimes a team would, if the economy was going well, they would go along and they would pay their players and all. And then if things went south, the economy dips, then that team would possibly go out of business. And so you had teams coming in and out of business, and they really prospered during World War II because, again, you have people getting defense jobs, and there was money in the economy, and they flourished then.
All right. So the celebration will be September the 14th. It will be 101 years, but you're really celebrating because it was 100 years last year,
Yes.
right? Where's the celebration going to be?
It's going to be at the Missouri Historical Society on Elm Street.
Okay.
And Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the Negro League Baseball Museum, will give the address. And he has a slide presentation and all, and he's going to give people a real dose of Negro League Baseball history.
Okay, and what time will that be?
The reception starts at 6:30, and the actual presentation starts at 7.
Okay, and everybody's invited to attend this.
Yes,
You need to make reservations ahead of time?
No, you don't make reservations ahead of time. But what we're concerned about is if there is a large crowd, we want everyone to wear a mask.
Okay. So
And
wear a
so-
mask. If you're planning to go, please wear masks.
Yes, and because we won't be able to exactly social distance because we don't know how many people are going to be there.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So mark it on your calendar. It's September 14th at the State Historical Society.
Yes.
The other thing, so when Jackie Robertson was the first black player hired by a national team then, after the boycott, right?
In the modern era, the first black player was really Moses Fleetwood Walker, but he played back in the 1800s.
Okay.
But Robinson signed his contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1945.
Okay. You were also telling me that the St. Louis Cardinals was the only baseball team this far west, and that the Cardinals had a fan base all the way out in California, from Missouri out to the West Coast, because they were broadcast on KMOX radio, which is 50,000 watts, and you could listen. Back then, you could listen to Cardinal games in California.
Yeah, and they were the only major league team in the western part of the United States. That was the westernmost team.
Was the St. Louis Cardinals.
St. Louis Cardinals. And to this day, you can find Cardinal fans all over the western part of the United States.
Because of that.
Because of that. Because the Dodgers and Giants didn't move until 1958.
Okay, and the Cardinals were, when did the Cardinals come into being?
Oh, that was back in the 1900s.
Okay. Well, you really are a wonderful historian. Is there any other bit? We've got less than a minute left. Anything else that you want to mention?
Well, I would like people to visit the Negro League Baseball Museum. It is a national treasure, and it's right here in our state. And if you want to know about that segment of baseball, it is a wonderful place to go. And the exhibits are, for example, I just went for about the 19th time, and they have a segment on the first black players on all the major league teams.
Okay.
From Jackie Robinson to Pumpsie Green.
All right. John, thank you so much for coming by today. It was really interesting chatting with you. And I want to say special thanks to my friend Bill Clark, who actually set this up with me for you to come out here.
Well,
so we appreciate it.
Yeah, Bill and I go back a long way.
He's a good guy, isn't he?
Oh, great man.
All right, and so are you. We appreciate it, John Kelly. If it's something you'd like to hear, pepperpmissouri.edu. Bye-bye.